What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we're coming off one of the more boring weekends of the season in college football. Just not a lot going on this past weekend. We didn't really see any big upsets. We didn't see any big games. There were no big games, really. I don't think there was any top 25 versus top 25 matchup. I had SMU versus Tulsa as a top 25 game, but I don't think that Tulsa was ranked in the AP or coaches poll. They were in my poll, and they won that game. Miami beating Virginia Tech was actually an upset. Virginia Tech was favored, but it was a very small spread. So there really wasn't much going on there. I did not do a takeaway video just because there wasn't a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to give you my takeaways here in this video before I get into my top 25. Really just two takeaways. First of all, Florida and Notre Dame, both of those teams, they took care of business, did not have letdowns after big wins. I was really impressed with both of those teams. And they look focused. They look ready to go, like they are going to make it all the way to the end of the season with a chance to make it into the college football playoff. Of course, it's going to be tough for Florida to beat Alabama, tough for Notre Dame to beat Clemson again. But those two teams do control their own destiny, and if they're able to win out, they will be in the college football playoff. So that was a big takeaway for me. And also the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is not getting a team in the college football playoff. It's just not going to happen. Oregon and USC are the two teams that maybe had a chance, but they are not winning impressively enough. I think with the resume that won't be there, I just don't see either one of these teams having really any chance to make the college football playoff unless we get total chaos. So bad news if you're a Pac-12 fan. It's just not going to happen, I think, this year. Oregon, USC needed to really blow teams away to have a chance, and they both need to probably be undefeated in the Pac-12 championship game. That might still happen, but their wins are just not looking all that impressive right now. So unfortunate news for Pac-12 fans, but let's get into the top 25 now. And there was very little change for me this week. A little bit of change towards the top and a little bit of change here at the bottom. So SMU is now no longer in my top 25, and USC enters into the top 25. That's really the only change. I don't feel great about ranking USC because they haven't looked very good. I know they're 2-0, but they have not looked very good. But they've been doing what they need to do to win games, and so I'm going to give them some credit for that. They've been very good in the fourth quarter, and if they continue to win games, they're going to stay ranked and probably move up in the rankings. But this is a team that I think has potential to be really good this year, and they're just not playing at that level for four quarters right now. But they're 2-0, and I don't know who else you would rank here. Army is a team I was going to consider, but they lost. West Virginia's looking pretty good, but they've got 3 losses. It's hard for me to put a 3-loss team in here. So USC right now, number 25. Texas, Auburn, Oklahoma, they all move up one spot because SMU fell out. And Tulsa, I think, also moved up one. Or this is maybe about where I had them last year. Nice win for Tulsa coming from behind to beat SMU. That was a great game. Windy game. I remember you could see the leaves blowing all over the field. It looked like there was a flag on every play. And it looked like this game was going to go to SMU for a while, but Tulsa in that second half really just turned it around. Their defense played lights out, and they have a big game coming up with Cincinnati. I think they might give Cincinnati one of their tougher tests this year. Their defense can get after you, and they play really well in the second half. So that's going to be an interesting matchup coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in that one. So no change here, 16 through 20. No team really did enough to make me change my mind. Now, Northwestern, if they beat Wisconsin, I think they could really move up in this top 25. They've been winning games, but they haven't played anyone great, but they've looked really solid. And I've got this team ranked at number 17. I hate to say, teams are moving up and moving down. I don't really do that. I just reevaluate the teams each week. But there just wasn't anything happening from this past weekend to make me think any differently about these teams, except at the top. You're going to see a change at the top of my top 25 in just a second. But 16 through 20, no change here. These teams all stay steady. Northwestern, I think, is the one team you might see jump up. I think everyone else is pretty much set where they're at. I don't see them doing much to really improve their ranking. But Northwestern, if they can beat Wisconsin, they could be in the top 10. And I think we had no change here, 11 through 15. I still got Coastal Carolina, Oklahoma State, Wisconsin, Indiana, Miami. Wisconsin, I consider moving back up now that they've played a couple of games, but Michigan is not very good, and so I don't know how much credit you can really give them. Indiana and Wisconsin both destroyed Michigan. So, I mean, I don't know. Indiana with a big test coming up with Ohio State. They'll have a chance to move up, obviously. Wisconsin, a big test against Northwestern. So you could see Indiana and Wisconsin move way up in my top 25 next week. They could move down some. I don't think a loss in those games is going to move much for them unless they get blown out. So Indiana, Wisconsin, two teams that have a lot of potential to maybe move up in my top 25. And then I have Miami at number 11. They just do what they need to do to win games, kind of like USC. They were, down at NC State last week and this past weekend against Virginia Tech. It looked like Virginia Tech might win that game, but Miami just made the plays they needed to win the game. It almost felt like in the second half, Miami was going to win. They were just going to do what they needed to do and nothing else. And that, to me, is a sign of a good team, but not a great team. If you're a great team, you win a game like that easily. Virginia Tech is a solid team, but they're not a top 10 team or anything like that. So Miami kind of staying steady there at number 11. I think they have top 10 potential, but they're not doing it consistently. This is still a very good football team. And then we have 6 through 10 here. Oregon for me at number 10. Not all that impressive against Washington State, but they had a horrible first half with turnovers. And you could tell in the second half this was clearly the better team. Tyler Shuck's playing pretty good, especially running the football. He's given them an element that maybe Herbert did not give them last year. And so I think this is a good football team. But they haven't done enough for me to really move them up in my rankings. Georgia still at number 9. They didn't play this past weekend. They're 4-2. I know the two losses were pretty rough, but they were two really good teams, two teams that I have in the top 5. So I've got Georgia there still at number 9. BYU, 8-0. They didn't play this weekend, I don't think, but they continue to roll, and or they have been rolling this year, and so I don't really see any movement for them. Cincinnati, no movement there. So Ohio State, we get to the top 6. That's where you're going to see some movement from me. I've actually dropped Ohio State down to number 6. Not necessarily that they've done anything wrong. I mean, they didn't play this past weekend. But you look at some of their wins. I thought that Penn State win was really impressive at the time, but it turns out Penn State's not very good. Ohio State just has not played anyone really at all that is even halfway decent. So I don't think we can really judge Ohio State just yet. We don't really have enough. They've only played 3 games, and there have been some issues. The defense hasn't been great. They haven't ran the football all that well, and there's other teams ahead of them that I think have proven that they are top 5 teams. Ohio State might be, but they haven't proven it yet, and so I've dropped them. Now, if they take care of business against Indiana, if they blow them out, I think you might see Ohio State back in the top 3, but as of now, I'm not just going to assume that they're a top 3 team based off of my preseason evaluation of this team, although I think they are, but I don't make assumptions. I'm only basing this off of what I have seen on the field, and we just haven't seen enough from Ohio State. So they're down to number 6 for me, and I made some changes now in the top 5, obviously, and I get it. I get there's going to be an argument here. Why is Florida ahead of Texas A&M when Texas A&M beat them head-to-head? And normally I always go with the head-to-head in a situation like this, but the way Florida is playing right now, the improvement that they have made, and I know Texas A&M has improved as well, but Florida, it's like they're on another level. They're playing very similar to LSU from last year. They're running the football better. The offensive line, pass protection has been really solid for them. Kyle Trask just keeps getting better, and the defense keeps getting better. This Florida team is starting to look like a team that I think could maybe challenge Alabama, maybe even beat them in the SEC championship, which is something I was not saying a few weeks ago. Texas A&M is still a very good football team, in my opinion. I think they still have a chance to make it into the college football playoff. But Florida is just looking a little bit better to me right now. And you go back to their head-to-head matchup. It was on the road for Florida, and it was a very, very close game that could have gone either way. You play that game on a neutral field. You play today. I think Florida wins that game. I think it's close again, but I would take the Gators. Also, Florida had some injuries in that game, and I'm trying to evaluate these teams for when they're at their best, not how they played last weekend. When they're full strength, that's how I'm evaluating these teams. If I was evaluating Clemson just on the last couple of weeks, I'd probably have them even below Texas A&M, but I know what I'm going to get from that defense when they're healthy, when Trevor Lawrence is in their own offense. I still think Clemson is a top 4 team, but Florida, to me, is past them. Florida's looking a little bit better right now. Those last 2 wins over Georgia and then over Arkansas, when they stay aggressive on offense, this team is pretty much unstoppable. They didn't even have Kyle Pitts this past weekend. I thought that might slow them down a little bit, but no. These receivers are making plays. The receivers remind me of the receivers from LSU last year. The defense plays really well at times. I know they're not super consistent. The offensive line continues to get better, and like I said, they're running the football better. Florida is a very good team, and I kind of think instead of 3 teams that are elite like I thought all year, maybe there's 6 teams. Maybe it's Alabama, Notre Dame, Florida, Clemson, Texas A&M, and Ohio State, and it's really tough to compare these teams and figure out where you should rank them. But enough about Florida. I have Texas A&M at number 5. They didn't play. Clemson didn't play. They're number 4. Notre Dame improved a lot over the past few weeks. They looked really good against Boston College. Ian Book, his pocket presence, I tell you, it reminds me of Joe Burrow from last year. The way he's able to move in that pocket, avoid pressure, it's very impressive to watch. The defense has been solid all year. They've run the football really well, but the passing game, that's where they're starting to get better, more explosive, and they're starting to look like a team that could maybe beat Clemson in a rematch. I think that's going to be a great game. Boy, this playoff picture is going to be tough to figure out because you're going to have at least, I think, 5 or 6 teams that have a very good argument. But Notre Dame is really looking like a good football team. I think they have clearly showed that they are in this elite category. They're not in that second tier. They're in that top tier, and we may have 6 teams in that top tier, like I said. Alabama didn't play. I still have them at number 1. You can make an argument for Notre Dame to be number 1. It's the way they're playing right now, but I just still think Alabama is a little bit more of a complete team. Just maybe there aren't as many holes in Alabama, and really neither team has a lot of holes, but I trust Alabama a little bit more. They've got the win over Texas A&M. They've got the win over Georgia. Resume-wise, it's a little bit better than Notre Dame, although Notre Dame does have that one over Clemson. But it's close, and really, if you want to make an argument for Notre Dame at number 1, I wouldn't disagree with that. I actually think that you could put them at number 1 the way they're playing right now. I think as far as playing right now, those top 3 teams, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Florida, they look like the best teams in the country, and that's why I have them in the top 3. Clemson, A&M, Ohio State, they all look really good as well. But I have made this change. It doesn't mean it's going to stay this way. It doesn't mean that Clemson can't get back ahead of Florida. We'll continue to evaluate these teams and see what Clemson looks like now that they're going to be a little bit healthier this next weekend, and see what Texas A&M looks like against a very high-powered Ole Miss offense. A lot of things to figure out. You know, we had a boring weekend this past weekend. I'll admit it. But I said this to somebody. If you compare this past weekend to what we had in week 1, in week 2, before we even really had all the Power 5 teams playing, it was a great weekend of college football, and we still saw some good games. Penn State versus Nebraska, that was a great game. Miami, Virginia Tech, great game. SMU, Tulsa, great game. And so it's not like it was a terrible weekend of college football. And when I say boring, I just mean there wasn't a lot of movement in the top 25. There weren't many upsets, like I said earlier. Playoff picture really hasn't changed, so it was boring from that standpoint. But this is my latest top 25. It's about time to start the playoff rankings, so I should be plan to do my projection videos where I'm going to project what the playoff committee is going to do. And once we get those first playoff rankings, I think it'll be much more clear what each team is going to need to do to get into the college football playoff. So that'll be fun to look at all of that as well. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments about my top 25, anything you would change, or if you just want to tell me how you would rank these teams, please do that down below. We will continue all our videos this week. The playoff eliminator coming up, the upset alert, give you my updated playoff predictions and all of that. So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.